Okay, we shall begin. Welcome to this virtual open day, which is delivered on behalf of the Sound of Music program here at the London College of Communication, which is part of the University of the Arts, London. And today we are going to be hearing about two specific courses, the MA in Music Production and the MA in Sound Arts, which are both part of this program. So, start with a little introduction to me. It's always nice for you to know who's speaking to you. So, my name is Adam Stanović. I'm the program director. So, I direct the sound and music area at LCC, London College of Communication. I thought it would be worth just saying a little bit about my background and what I'm interested in. And then I want to link that to the program as a whole. So I'm a composer and performer of electronic music, otherwise known as electroacoustic music. And what you see on the screen there is 3 of my solo albums. The most recent one published last year by Empreinte Digital, a record label based in Canada, in Montreal in Canada. And all of my work involves more or less the use of recorded sound. So I record sounds from the world around us, and then using those sound materials, I begin to explore different ways in which transformations and manipulations of sound enacted upon those recorded materials can elaborate musical form. And so you'll see here a selection of some of the publications I've been involved in. The one in the middle with the man holding the very large fish is a live electronics piece that was for recorder and electronics. So I also work with live electronics. And what you don't see here on the screen is any examples of the animations and film works I've done or sound installations. So I work across quite a few different forms of media. And I wrote my PhD on the topic of sound diffusion, which is a practice of performing electronic music. And what you see on the screen are 2 photos that I took of concerts I gave, both of them strangely in France. The one on the left was from April last year at the Groupe de Recherche Musicale in Paris, where I gave a concert of a commissioned piece. And what you see there on the screen is an array of loudspeakers known as an acousmonium. And the performance practice involves activating those different loudspeakers to create the illusion that sound is articulating and moving through the concert space. I also write about electronic music and sound art. So this is a book, the most recent one that I have, in this case, co-edited with colleagues from other institutions. And it's called Sound Art and Music. So it looks at the division between the sound arts and how sound arts intersect with what's traditionally or more recently been known as music. And it does so from 3 perspectives. It looks at philosophy, composition, and performance. So this kind of gives you a sense of the performance practice in motion. A concert from earlier this academic year from a concert in Stanford University in the States. So I'm telling you all of this really because what you will find within the Sound of Music program is each of the things I've just mentioned embedded in all aspects of what we do. So making music, making sound art, presenting through curated events, through concerts, through live electronic performances, through improvisation, aspects of sound art, music, theorizing about sound and music. So the next few slides are just going to look a little bit more at the program and what the vision for this program is. And we'll touch on some of these core terms that hopefully give you a sense of the identity we're trying to build and present at LCC. So it probably follows from what I've said already that a great deal of what we do is practice-led. Which means that practice is at the heart of what we do. And by practice, I've given a few examples already, from composing through to performing, improvising, and so on. But we are a department which is practice-led. And so on the screen here, you see actually a PhD student who's currently studying at LCC. But this is a photo from a master's degree, so prior to this current study, looking at different technologies which are affecting the voice. So talking of voice, the second sort of major part of the identity of our department is very much about developing a creative voice. So because we're practice-led, we're interested in you having a practice and developing one, but we want that practice to be yours. We don't want it to be something which is just a copy of one of the members of staff or a copy of another composer or sound artist. We want that you find and develop and study and work upon what it is that makes your creative voice yours. So the person you see on the screen at the moment is a current student whose interest lies at the intersection of heavy metal and electroacoustic music, and trying to find ways in which electroacoustic approaches to sound material can be used to affect heavy metal. Very unique. The only person I've come across who's looked at hybridizing these two forms of music. And we hope that anybody coming on our MA courses will develop the same idea, will come with an idea of their own creative interest and influences, and develop them with supervision over the course of the degree to establish what it is that makes their creative voice theirs. Now, the next slide has a short video, which says that in slightly different terms. I hope you're going to be able to hear this.
You have something to say. You know it, we know it. But how can you show it? Creativity can be challenging. Maybe you'll do something unexpected. Dream up an idea, then flip it on its head. Maybe you'll look a little deeper, imagine new futures, tell new stories, make people feel things. Maybe you just don't know how to show it, and you try one way and then another way, and keep trying and failing until you find the right way. Your way. Because whatever you have to say, however big or small it might feel, you owe it to yourself to say it. Take your idea, make it a reality, and then set it free. Creativity can be challenging, sure, but guess what? You're up for the challenge. So, what are you gonna say?
Okay, so this is obviously not a program-specific video, but it very much presents the same idea that I've just talked about.
You have something to say.
The idea of everybody on the course developing their own particular flavor and interest in creative terms. Another major strand of our identity relates to history, context, and criticism of existing and pre-existing works and theory. So we want that, of course, people on the course have their own creative identity, but we want them also to be able to articulate where that creative identity has come from. So what are the many different factors which feed into a particular tradition, a particular genre? How are they intertwined? How might we reflect on the history of particular traditions or genres? How might we begin to critique them? How might we begin to critique individual works or individual types of practice. These are all questions that we're fascinated in, and we're questions that we hope you will align with your own particular creative voice. The point being that nobody's creativity comes out of nothing. It doesn't form out of a vacuum. It has its own history. It emerges out of various different interwoven factors. And we want some understanding of that and articulation of that and recognition of it. And that you're able to frame your creative practice relative to other works or traditions that have gone before. We are an extremely collaborative institution and therefore also department. So our program has collaboration at the heart of it. Now, you'll see a little bit later when I talk specifically about the two master's courses that collaboration is embedded within them, in the sense that there are specific units dedicated to collaborative practice. But of course, collaboration is part of pretty much everything we do at LCC and UAL, whether it's like you see on the screen, musicians or sound artists collaborating together, or whether it's looking for collaborations right across the suite of different arts-based disciplines we have. And this is one of the brilliant things about being in a university of the arts. There are many, many different art forms here. And of course, the vast majority of them want music and sound. So our program is housed in what we call the Screen School. This is one of 3 schools at LCC. And I'm going to give you in a moment a little diagram which shows exactly where our courses sit. Here we are. So we have, within the Screen School, we have 3 different programs: film and television on the left, moving image and digital arts in the middle, and sound and music over on the right-hand side. And I've highlighted in yellow, for no particular reason, the 2 courses we're talking about today: MA Sound Arts, MA Music Production. And I find this quite a useful slide because, on the one hand, why would sound be in a screen school, with screen typically being thought of as a largely visual medium? But of course, screen is not a largely visual medium. All forms of screen art typically have sound, music, often dialogue. And you can see, therefore, here the suite of different courses that our sound and music courses are intimately connected with. And so a lot of collaborations which happen with MA Sound Arts and MA Music Production students cross all of these different other disciplines. So I think it's quite useful to see this because these are our closest collaborators. A little bit about the Screen School, with some faces that you will encounter if you decide to study with us.
London College of Communication is located at Elephant and Castle, which is right in the centre of London. We've been teaching film and television here for nearly 40 years, and we're constantly bringing in new courses as the industry changes. We have courses in film and television, sound arts and screenwriting, but we also have courses in animation, virtual reality and games design. We create narratives and interactive experiences for our audiences. We know the industry is not as diverse as our student body, so it's a social justice issue for us to train our students to become the new faces of industry and to carry their voices forward.
We're a film school, a screen school, a university that have got things to say about how the industry can be even better than it is. So we're also looking into the future and saying, this is fantastic, but there's a lot that we can improve. We ask big questions about film culture and film heritage. We emerge from that with relevant contributions to developing a global culture.
It's really important to me to live and study in a place that has so many different people and cultures.
We're launching our new master's program in alternative reality and virtual reality. Those are newish technologies that are helping us rethink what an engagement with a range of human experience might be.
One of the really exciting things about coming to study at the London College of Communication is that everybody studying a creative discipline of some sort, and they all interconnect.
We offer the opportunity for our students to collaborate across courses. This means students from VR get to work with a student studying sound design, get to work with students in animation. This is a really important opportunity for our students to understand a real-world creative environment. Students are fully prepared to go out into the industry and be the creative voices of the future.
Looking back, I really value the luxury of collaboration, the joy of working with people.
The college has incredible facilities, from workshops and technical suites through to the Stanley Kubrick archive that contains everything from his shooting scripts to his advertising campaigns.
I think I'm going to leave LCC with a much more developed practice, a lot more confidence in the work that I'm making and the direction I'm going, a broader network, and just more experience in presenting my work as well in a variety of different contexts.
Having people who understand games design and music production and even things like screen printing around you really helps.
We have many alumni that we're extremely proud of. They've won Oscars, they've won BAFTAs. Their films have screened at Cannes and Sundance and festivals all over the world. It's really important for us to continue to understand and celebrate our history and take it with us into the future.
Okay, so at this part of the presentation, we look in a little bit more detail at the two specific courses that you're hopefully all here to hear about. So the MA Music Production and the MA Sound Arts. And I'm just going to introduce some of the key ideas of these two different courses. I'm going to show you the diagrams of the courses, so which modules, we call them units, you would study. But as I say, a quick reminder, if you have questions, please do put them in the chat, because these are really helpful for me to be able to then respond at the end of the session. And it generally follows that if one person has a question, other people are thinking the same thing and have the same question too. Okay, so MA Music Production first. So MA Music Production is fairly newish course. Next year will be its second year, and the course leader is Rachel Finney, who has a very interesting suite of practices, which both deal with studio productions, but also particularly with the use of magnetic tape in her practice. Rachel is also writing a lot about forms of production, and I think this week is traveling to Los Angeles to deliver a research paper based on some of her theoretical research. So why music production? Why an MA in music production? Well, we're going to hopefully answer this question over the next few slides, but just a little snapshot in this one. So it's an opportunity post previous studies to start refining your creative practice, but particularly your creative studio and production practices. It's of interest, as I mentioned before, to people who have a particular interest in production as a form of collaborative practice. I would argue that production is most often a form of collaborative practice, unless one is, of course, producing one's own sound art or music. We are very music industry aligned. The course is accredited by James, which is the industry body for accreditation. And they advise on a number of matters to do with curriculum and to do with the facilities that we have, and also help support our professional focus in terms of thinking about professional skills, industry-based skills that are associated with the discipline of music production. So, who studies on the MA Music Production? Well, we hope that we're very diverse in terms of interests of music production. We don't think of music production as being one thing. We think of it as being a suite of practices which can involve a very diverse range of different technologies, sound types, musical forms, and so on. So I think we're on the more experimental edge of the music production discipline. And because of that, we generally think of students studying on this course as being curious, open-minded, experimental, collaborative, but also who are interested in learning new skills, new technologies, new ways of thinking about sound and music, new ways of thinking about what production is or might be. So, quick overview of the course as it stands. I'm actually going to show you this slide again in a few moments, so I'm not going to say too much about it now. I'll say a little bit more in a couple of moments' time. But essentially what you see here on the screen are a series of 5 blue rectangles, each one representing a module. So the very first one is on the top left-hand side of the screen, called the Practice of Music Production. And the very final one is the final major project down at the bottom right-hand corner. And so for the vast majority of the time, you're focusing on individual units, with the exception of this second block where you have 2 modules running together. But I'll say a little bit about the individual modules in a moment, because first of all, I wanted to show you this. So this is how we've sort of thought about the course in terms of there being 3 central curriculum areas. So the first area, starting right from the beginning of the course, we're thinking of more as technical and research practices. So we're aware that not everybody starting on this MA will necessarily have done a BA in music production. Maybe some people might have done a BA in or BSc in music technology. There'll be other people who have done an undergraduate degree in music, and perhaps only a few modules in a production or technology area. And of course, there'll be a suite of people who have not formally studied music at degree level before. So this introductory term is really trying to create parity among people's technical skills, showing people our suite of studios and encouraging people to understand things about signal flow, for instance, within the studio, and doing the same really in terms of research skills. So thinking about ways in which one can articulate an argument or criticism or a particular polemic or perspective relative to the discipline of music production. Second term starts to focus a little bit more on the music industry or the music production industry and forms of collaboration within that industry. As I hope is clear from what I've said already, we don't think of that as something devoid of criticism. The music industry, as probably everybody here knows, is in urgent need of some revisionist thinking and approaches and reconstitution and reconstruction. And we see students on this course as being a major part of the future of the music industry and forming that reconstruction of it. So we encourage a lot of criticism about what the industry may be, but also developing skills that are industry focused and focused on collaborative practices. Towards the summer term, we look at ways of working to fix briefs or set brief as might be delivered through industry, and therefore delivering something in terms of a production, which leads into the final major project where you tailor your own interests in a larger body of work. So the modules that we have map on to these sort of curriculum areas in the following ways. So just to return then to this diagram, We start off with this module called Practice of Music Production, which has three sort of main strands in it. One is studio-based, so it's looking at how studios function, signal flow, effects racks, and various different ways of controlling studio-based recordings. The second strand is more embedded within our computer labs, so looking more at DAWs and methods for editing, processing, transforming, and ultimately mixing sound. And then a critical component, which is looking at research skills. So as we move along, then we start to split out some of those core music production skills. And so this top module here focuses obviously on the more theoretical side. I say obvious because of the title. It's critical perspectives on music production. But this is running alongside a collaborative unit, which is very much putting into practice in a collaborative scenario some of the ideas that came from the practice of music production module before. So it's fulfilling a real world partnership with a collaborator or collaborators. So we have a wide range of different types of collaboration. People have collaborated with film, animation, virtual reality, games, and those can be collaborations found within the institution, or they can be outside of the institution. The purpose really is to use music production skills within a real context. Music industry practices, in a sense, is similar, except that the brief is not defined by you. It's defined by an industry partner that we work with. And so typically there's a brief which is set by an industry partner, which then they consult on. So we have industry coming in and working with you to guide you through the process of developing something in response to a brief. And then I mentioned already, final major project. This is your opportunity to design and tailor your own major body of work. It could be studio-based, it could be live, it could be very experimental with media, it could be more performative. There are many, many options. What is not showing on this diagram are the guest lectures, which happen currently fortnightly. And those are typically producers of varying different forms of music who come in and deliver a session specifically for you about their practice. Great opportunity to have some industry-led sessions and to ask questions about how people develop their practice, develop their careers, and get advice on your own practice and work. MA Sound Arts. MA Sound Arts runs alongside the MA Music Production. We share a lot of the same rooms and facilities. This course is run by course leader Thomas Gardner. And Thomas has, like Rachel, a very varied background. In addition to his work with sound art, Thomas plays cello. He performs music. He also does a lot of coding and is very able to deal with the more technological aspects of sound art, as you might encounter in more curatorial or gallery-based spaces with coding Arduinos or Raspberry Pis or something. So the MA Sound Arts, of course, has a distinctly different flavor or identity to the MA Music Production. On the whole, one would probably say that it's focused a little bit more on the critical engagement with the practice of sound art. And it's looking really at the intersection of sound, art, and culture, society, politics, aesthetics. And so It's very discursive, and it's discursive around what it means to have a practice, develop one, engage in processes of practice, and so on. And as it says here, there has been a very impressive body of artists who have emerged out of the MA Sound Arts course. It's been running, I think, for around about 15 years, and has become very much a focal point of sound arts in the UK. So a couple of photos here from what Thomas would certainly describe as the pinnacle of the MA, and something which you're heading towards right from the very beginning of the MA, which is this final major project. So this is something that occurs at the very end of the course, which is where we hire a specific gallery, an art gallery, in this case Dilston Grove, which is in London. And you can see it there in the top right-hand corner, this image. And it's a large space which we then use to curate an entire sound art exhibition and suite of performances. So some of these may be fixed media presented on large screens with loudspeakers. Some of them may be forms of interactive media, which require some degree of participation, which can be hands-on, physical, haptic interaction with an object that subsequently makes sound. We've had a lot of film and game in collaborations, or sound art students working on both. But also, as you see in the bottom right-hand corner, we also have a lot of students that engage in forms of music performance or sound art performance, using, in this case, an instrument, possibly also loudspeakers, computing technology, or forms of electronics. And as you see on the right-hand side of the same image, a loudspeaker. Thomas will be very keen to stress the importance of the final project, because it sort of combines a lot of the things which sound arts is about. So our sound arts course, of course, is about making sound art and all of the various practical things that go into making sound arts. But it's also about the theorizing and critiquing of sound art practices. And as a sort of third strand to that, also about the practice of curation for a real space. And this is something which is very, very unique within the discipline of sound art as a taught qualification, that we put so much attention in the notion and idea of curation for a space, with the idea that the course then equips you to be able to find commissions or gallery installations or opportunities to present your work in actual spaces beyond the course. A couple more images here showing you perhaps some of the other types of activities that people have engaged with, and giving you a sense, I hope, that although we are talking about sound arts, there is a big crossover with sound art and more experimental approaches to music making. This is the room we usually work in. Thomas is particularly keen on these photos, not least because they highlight some of the beautiful light that comes into the room, but also because you get a sense of I hope you get a sense of just how hands-on and discursive and interactive the sort of sessions are. So you can see here in the left-hand image, a lot of objects placed on these tables, which students are working around, holding, handling, looking at, discussing. It hopefully gives you a kind of flavor of the way that the course functions. We moved away from the more didactic instructional approach of teaching, where somebody stands at the front and imparts their knowledge, and instead encourage more interactive, discursive dialogue around what sound arts is and what the practice is. Both of the two MA courses have, of course, a research culture embedded within them. Most of our staff, if not all of our staff, in one way or another, are research active. But the MA Sound Arts has a particularly strong research culture because of its association with CRiSAP, which is the largest research centre at University of the Arts, London. It's the Creative Research in Sound Art Practice, is what CRiSAP stands for. And on the screen now, you can see some of the many people who are associated with CRiSAP, either directly as members, as emeritus members, or as research students within the within UAL. I say this because a lot of the students on the MA Sound Arts join in with the CRiSAP monthly meetings, where we listen to, present, talk about works which have been made by members of staff, PhD students, and now master's students. We also have a big crossover with the teaching and discursive part of the Sound Arts course and the professorial staff who are at UAL in the area of Sound Arts. So Kathy Lane and Angus Carlisle and Salome Vogelin are our three professors who deliver quite a lot of sessions on the MA Sound Arts. I'll just pause for a second while you have a quick look at the slide, because you'll see some of the research areas which CRiSAP looks at particularly, but I would say are common right across our program. Okay, course diagram. I'm not going to talk in too much detail around each unit here, each module, because as you can see, there are more modules than in the MA Music Production course. But it's a very similar type of structure. So we start off by looking at what is practice-based research. So how do you research something using a form of practice? And what happens when that practice is a sound arts practice? And running alongside that, we have a unit which looks more holistically across the range of different themes that one finds in contemporary sound arts. So those two are tied together, really. Moving on, we have exactly the same collaborative unit in exactly the same place. And at the current time, pretty much all of the MA courses at LCC and a lot of MA courses across UAL have this collaborative unit at this point in time. So it means that most people doing an MA across the institution are looking for collaborators, which is quite cool, really. As we move on, we start thinking about how one develops a project and then designs it and prepares it. And we're thinking here about preparatory grant writing or preparatory applications for commissions or preparatory work that one needs to do in order to have a gallery installation or put sound art in a context. And that runs alongside curatorial context. So what are those contexts for curating an event which is based on sound arts? And then, as with music production, a major project which is tailored by you and then supervised by people from the suite of lecturing staff on the course. So that is the two courses, albeit fairly briefly. I'm going to hurry through the next few slides, not because we're running out of time, we've got plenty of time, but because I want to leave a little bit of time at the end for some questions, if there are some. I can see that there are two that have appeared already. So a quick reminder, if you have questions, please do write them in the Q&A part. I'm aware that I spent less than 10 minutes on the two courses, so probably you have questions about some aspects of what is covered and what is not covered. What I'm going to say from this point on is it is the case for both of the degrees that we're talking about here, both the MA Music Production and the MA Sound Arts. And so it's departmental wide, and I'll show you a few of our facilities, a few ideas of kind of what we're trying to do in terms of being industry focused, and then we'll just very briefly whiz through the application process. So here we go. Well, I hope I've given a clear sense of this part already. So both of our MAs and our courses in general tend to be very industry or guest focused. So both the MA Sound Arts and the MA Music Production have a weekly or fortnightly guest lecture series, which typically tends to be by people focused on the industry, perhaps a slightly nebulous term when it comes to sound arts. But either way, people who have an active practice in the field. Facilities-wise, we have an ever-expanding range of facilities for you to use. And so what you see here is our synth workbench, which is our ongoing project, which keeps just getting bigger and bigger and bigger, to the point that we ran out of space in the room it was in, and we've now had to fragment it across various different rooms. But it'll keep on growing. And we have interest right across the spectrum of students in using the synths here, from sound arts to music production. Performance lab. This is one of our larger teaching spaces. It's not the best photo because it just shows the massive Audience Heritage desk at the front of the room. But behind that is an area where you can seat around 40 to 50 people. And it's also got a 16-channel sound card and a permanent array of 8 loudspeakers, but actually for the last year it's been 16 that are there for doing spatial audio and surround sound, either composition or mixing. This is a very flexible space, so aside from what you see there with this large desk, a lot of things can be configured to how you want the room to be set up and arranged, really. We have the composition studio, which is largely a singular occupancy space often for composing. We've got an Adobe Atmos look-alike, or hopefully sound alike, in this room. The ceiling isn't high enough for it to be certified as such, but it's the same spatial placement of loudspeakers. And if you don't want to use all, it splits out into a 7.1 or a 5.1 system. So it's a fairly small room, but it's great for doing individual composition in multi-channel. And if you want to work principally in stereo, well, we've just built 3 new control rooms. This is a photo of one of them. Again, with the Audience Heritage desk, multiple loudspeaker options there to switch, compare and contrast. And all of those are connected with tie lines through to live rooms, which I think I got a picture of. Yes, so there's one of them. And they're used perhaps more often by music production students and sound arts, but they are facilities available to anybody on the program. So these tend to be more spaces which are used by groups rather than individuals. Staff, well, I will not say very much about staff because you can explore each and every member of staff through the website by clicking on the various different names listed on the courses. But I would like to say, I think our staff is amazing. And one of the most exciting things about our program is just how diverse the pool of staff are in terms of their practice, their interests, their research backgrounds, and so on. It's a really vibrant and eclectic and exciting place to be. And it's really unusual to find so many people who are focused on sound arts and music production practices within one institution. I mentioned CRiSAP already, but just to say that although CRiSAP tends to focus a little bit more on sound arts practice, we do have a lot of crossover with sound art and music, as per my edited book at the beginning, which is called precisely that. So I mentioned the most of the things on this slide already. I mentioned that we're accredited by James, which is an accrediting body for a lot of music production type courses, and our music production course is accredited too. But I didn't mention the AVID partnership. So we're an AVID learning partner, which means that we often have opportunities for people to do the accreditation in Pro Tools. Finally, for me, applications. You'll find a lot of information on the website about applications. There's probably no big surprises here. It's expecting, as you can see on the screen, details about you, your qualifications, your employment history, if that's relevant. But the major thing is a personal statement and a portfolio of work, which demonstrate collectively your interested in doing this course or this discipline, and examples of your work. So in terms of the portfolio, well, we're interested in perhaps 2, maybe 3 examples of how your work relates to either music production or sound arts. And I would pick the best examples you can think of, which show how your practice is developing, what your core interests are, how you think about materials, themes, techniques, as it says on the slide. Personal statement, really similar. I mean, why our course? What was it that made you want to apply to our particular course as opposed to others? And that could be anything. It could be, the diverse pool of staff. It could be the particular facilities. It could be the focus on curatorial practices in the MA Sound Arts. It could be the fact that the course leader uses a lot of magnetic tape to do music production. Could be many, many different things. But we're interested in hearing about that. And we're interested in hearing about what you would like to do with your practice and how you see it developing, where you see it going in the future. Couple of key contacts. It might be a good idea if you have questions to just do a quick screenshot of this. You'll find them, of course, on the UAL website. So if you don't have a chance to screenshot, they are easy to find. And we now arrive at the end. So I will pause and I will invite any questions that you have. Please do ask if you have anything that you'd like to know that I haven't covered.
Thank you so much, Adam, for running through those courses and informing our visitors about the programme and amazing work that takes place within. As Adam had mentioned, if you do have any further questions, please write those in the Q&A part of the control panel, and we will address them shortly. We do have a few here, which we'll make our way through. So the first one is, you've talked extensively about the studio spaces. Can you tell us a little bit how these are booked, and are they accessible freely for the students on the programme? Yes, I can. So what we've done is, for different units, we've allocated a different amount of time for students to complete their work. So it varies depending on which unit you're studying on, how much time is allocated. And we've done that really to try and mirror what happens in the real world. You get, let's say, a music production job to produce somebody's album. You're not going to get an endless suite of studio time. There'll be an amount of time which is available for you to work on it. So we're thinking of that as mirroring a real world scenario. Having said that, as you go through the courses, some people will gravitate more towards studios, and some people will gravitate more towards lab-based practices or performance-based practices, which are not in studios. So it tends to be that even though people want to specialize more, perhaps in one thing or another, those spaces actually strangely become a little bit more available, which is exactly what you want when you get towards your final major project. So
So yeah, they are bookable relative to individual modules, but we have a fairly open idea that different types of practices will want different types of facilities at different points in time. So we're always open to suggestions of things being used. So if you wanted to, for example, use the to create a multi-channel piece, then probably you want to be in that large performance lab as opposed to in one of the stereo studios. So then we try and find the booking for you in that space. So yeah, it's basically, the short answer is it's allocated relative to each individual module based on a working out of what we think is a really good length of time to complete the assessment.
Thank you for that. Someone here is asking, how much practical contact teaching time do you get on individual courses?
Well, it varies, of course, depending on which modules you're on and which combination of modules you have. So if you remember from the diagram, sometimes you're just on one module and sometimes you're on two combined. So it does tend to vary across the year, but what we aim to do is try and put everything on 2 days. So at the moment, we have our MA music production running largely on Monday and Tuesday, and we have classes most of the time throughout those days. And we have the MA Sound Arts running on Wednesday and Thursday, and again, classes running most of the days. So to give you a very concrete example, students on MA Sound Art will do all day Wednesday and Thursday morning, and then the guest lecture is on the Thursday afternoon. So it's therefore 2 full days, but a day and a half, which is fully timetabled. So we timetable it like that, kind of knowing that a lot of people, particularly nowadays, and doing master's level qualifications are working. So we try and put it in a time slot where people can work around the course.
Amazing, thank you. Are you able to give us a little bit more detail on the previous guest lecturers that have attended? Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, they're all available online, actually. You can have a look at the suite, and in fact, the vast majority of them are public. So all of the MA Sound Arts ones are. So you can actually go in and watch those via the CRiSAP website, and there's a full list of them there. I mean, they're really, really diverse. So we've had electroacoustic composers, we've had people who do more performance art, we have people who are more on the theoretical writing side. So really, really diverse, eclectic mix. I would say, and one thing I should add to that actually is we have a lot of workshops which happen that are program wide. So tomorrow we have a workshop, for instance, on feedback, and it's going to run all day, and it's going to be setting up various different ways of working with feedback. So it's not specifically a music production or sound arts workshop. It's just bookable and available by anybody who has an interest in ways in which you might creatively use feedback. That's one of, I don't know the exact number, but I would say about 15 workshops probably we've run this academic year so far across the program. It might be slightly less, it might be slightly more. So yeah, really, really mixed.
Thank you. Someone here is asking, particularly for the music production course, is there a particular digital audio workstation that they'd be using, or they can choose which one they want to use whilst on the course?
Yes, this question often comes up. Our studios are designed to work with Pro Tools, and so they work best with Pro Tools, and that's because that's simply how they were designed. We run Pro Tools in all of the labs as well, so we have Pro Tools across the board, but we also have Logic because we're using Max, so we would have Logic. We also have Reaper, Super Collider, Max, Pure Data. We have a whole suite of different ways in which you can interact with sound. We have Ableton. It's so in a sense, it's probably advisable that you try and use all of them, because if you're particularly interested in music production and you want to take a job in a studio, they'll have what they have and you'll have to use it. So my advice would be try and engage with as many of these different technologies as you can. My experience, though, is once you do engage with them, you tend to find that they're all very, very similar in many ways, and in a sense, therefore, interchangeable skill sets between them. But you can't get around the fact that most studios nowadays have computing technologies right at the core of the studio itself, and therefore you need to engage with that. So we do have people using other DAWs in the studios, but they won't work as well as they're designed to do with Pro Tools.
Thank you, Adam. I've got one here. Someone is asking, is there opportunities to direct study? For example, if they choose to do music production, are there opportunities to do sound-based projects and vice versa?
It depends what the question means, really. I mean, if they're talking about some sort of fluidity between the MA Sound Arts and the MA Music Production, then no, because they are autonomous programs. But if they're thinking about how experimental might they be, then yeah, absolutely. I mean, both of our courses, and I would say our identity as a program, is really based on not seeing these things as as self-contained disciplines, and that there's a big fuzzy borderline between them, if any line at all. So, you know, I could imagine a lot of our current music production students actually being on the Sound Arts course, because their practices tend to be quite experimental, and so, you know, we don't sort of have that ideology or vision that a studio has one way of being used. We have the idea that it's a flexible, creative space in which you can enact all sorts of ideas about what sound and music might be. So, I mean, my own practice is perhaps a good example of that. So I call it electronic music. So I put it with that, but I spend a very, very long time teaching on sound arts courses, because a lot of what I'm doing crosses over with sound art and sound design and manipulating sound. And if you play my music to the vast majority of the public, they probably wouldn't think it was music at all.
Amazing, thank you very much. We've got a few more questions here, and we'll try to wrap up as quickly as possible. In regards to composition, can you describe what kind of practice it will involve?
Yeah, a bit of an open question, really, because I mean, it sort of depends on units. I mean, fundamentally, we want the ideas of composing and creating music to come from you. So some people will have some traditional music theory backgrounds and will be interested in paper-based composition. Some people will have no clue how to read a musical score and don't see it as remotely relevant to their practice, and then be more interested in composing through improvising with a group or through using a DAW to sequence sounds. Other people may be on the more experimental edge of using sound synthesis and setting synthesizers to randomize different patterns to generate sound. There is no one way that we sort of advocate for composing. What we're trying to do really is take what composing means to you and suggest ways in which you might take that, which you might explore, how you might expand or further develop your practice.
Thanks, Adam. Someone here is planning to move from unrelated field to music industry. What would you expect from a successful applicant in regards to application and portfolio?
Is that for music? I assume that's for music production.
It says into music industry, so I would presume so, yeah.
Well, this is always one of the trickier ones, because we are looking for a personal statement, which of course is a place where you can articulate that wish to to study, say, music production or things associated with the music industry. So that's great because you can explain your rationale for wanting to change. But we do also ask for a portfolio of works. So we would expect, I would suggest 2 as a minimum examples of work that you've done. Now, those can be very recent works. So it could be something that you create specifically for the submission. So if you look on the website, I mean, it's not a requirement necessarily that you have an undergraduate degree in an area associated with music. You can also come from many different types of diverse backgrounds, perhaps not even have an undergraduate degree. Perhaps you could have been working in industry, but we do need something to demonstrate that you will be able to focus on and complete the course of study. It would be quite wrong of us to accept people who don't demonstrate that. So perhaps working on a portfolio of some pieces might be a start.
Amazing, thank you very much. And to finish off the session, we've got quite a topical question over here. What do you think about music AI platforms which are providing any sound with a mere text prompt?
Ooh, that's a good question and a very long one to answer properly. Funnily enough, I had a long discussion about AI today with course leaders in terms of what we want to do in the future with what is acceptable, not acceptable. And of course, for some things, great, AI is going to really speed things up, and it's going to make the process of making music richer in the same way as all the advents of technology do. In other ways, it blurs the boundary of authorship and ownership and creativity. So it's a complicated topic. It's a great topic. It's one which, you know, I think people should be engaging with. If you're interested in music and AI, a good person to look up would be Holly Herndon. Holly Herndon has been performing recently on the edge of music production and sound arts, I would argue, but with artificial intelligence embedded in live performance. That might be a fun thing for you to look at. And I'm kind of suggesting that in the hope that shows a real openness to that as an area.
Thank you so much. And on that note, thank you very much, Adam, and thank you everyone for joining us today. I hope you found all the information relevant, and you'll be able to make a good decision about your future. If you do have any further questions, if you could go back to one slide, Adam.
Yep.
Do take a screenshot of these contacts on your screen and get in contact with the relevant departments, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. That's it from us for today. I hope you enjoyed the session, and I suppose without any further ado, we hope you have a lovely evening, afternoon, morning, wherever you are in the world, and we hope to see you join us in September. Take care and goodbye for now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.